Thanks for joining us, and welcome to today's episode of The Audit with our guest, Bill Harris. Today we'll be discussing the current state of quantum computing, how it works, its strengths and weaknesses, and where it's heading over the next several years. You can stay up to date on the latest cybersecurity topics by giving us a like and a follow on our socials and subscribing on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you source your podcasts. More information can be found on itauditlabs.com. Welcome back to The Audit, everyone. We're talking again with Bill Harris. So, Bill, thanks for coming on. And today we're talking about quantum computing. And I think that's a topic that most of us probably don't know a lot about. Alan's back with us. Alan, hopefully you can stay the whole time this time. Thanks for coming back in. Nick, always good to have you, of course. And Scott, too. Last week, Scott, we started talking about classical compute with Bill. And Bill's got a 3-part series. So classical compute, quantum, and then the future of storage. So looking at things like DNA and crystalline for storage. So, Bill, we'll turn it over to you, and we'll pepper you with questions. Maybe we just get a quick background for those who maybe didn't hear the previous podcast. Bill, do you want to just give a little insight into who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure, you bet. So my name is Bill Harris, and I do security architecture. And one of the things that I focus on is security and general technology futures. So today I'll be talking about the future of quantum between now and 2023.
Now in 2023 or?
Oh, I'm sorry, now in 2030. Yeah.
2030, got it, cool. Yep. And then, Alan, you're relatively new to this too. Do you want to just give a quick who you are besides being apparently a Wisconsin fan?
Yep. So I'm wearing this in honor of my youngest son, who graduates high school tomorrow. He's decided to attend the University of Wisconsin. So yet again, my kid and my money will be going to the University of Wisconsin. He'll be the second one. Yeah, he'll be the second one that I had go through that school. I'm Alan Green, IT professional. Been in the industry going on practically 30 years now. My current role is I manage a team of system engineers at a company that develops software and does some work in the credit industry. And I own that total responsibility for their infrastructure.
And last time, Alan, you were drinking what you were calling iced tea.
It was iced tea in a solo cup. But I got to admit, that's why I left the name of my employer out of this introduction, just in case someone makes an accusation again that I was drinking more than iced tea. It's not tied to anybody because it was iced tea, my friend.
We just happened to be talking about bourbon at the same time. And
yes.
Scott, Nick, Bill, and Alan are all fans of bourbon. Are you as well?
I like bourbon, and I was going to give Alan props for pouring bourbon into an iced tea can so that he could drink it throughout the recording of this episode.
All right. There you go.
So for today's agenda, this is what I'm going to go through today. We're going to talk about really kind of quantum and get you introduced from beginning to end, talk about where it's going. I'll kick off with talking about what exactly is quantum computing. Then we'll move to why it matters. We'll go through some use cases and talk about where quantum is being used today and really what benefits it brings. There are also challenges that come with quantum, so we'll go into that and tell you what's holding it back a little bit and what we're trying to do about it. I'll talk about the big elephant in the room, right? So quantum is always discussed in terms of cryptography, it seems, and what it's going to do to encryption in the future. We'll absolutely dive into that. And then we'll start to wrap up and talk about where quantum exists today, what countries are using it, what companies have it, and go into the roadmap from there and then wrap up. So first, let's kick off with some basics around quantum computer. So quantum was first envisioned in the 1980s by two scientists, Richard Feynman and Yuri Manin. They were seeking to solve a basic problem of physics, which is that it was really tough for physicists to model quantum mechanics on classical computers. So they realized that they would have to build a quantum computer to model quantum problems. That's why it was born. So in 1998, the first quantum computer was made. It had 2 qubits. And a qubit is the same thing as a regular bit insofar as it can represent a 0 or a 1. And it's nothing more than 2 superconductors on either side of an insulator. But in addition to representing a 0 or a 1, by the rules of quantum mechanics, it can also represent both at the same time. And we're going to be coming back to that concept a lot and talking about why that matters. But I'll touch on it a little bit here and say that in terms of how you can relate a qubit to a regular bit, n qubits take the value of 2 to the n bits. So if you've got 10 qubits, that can take on the values of about 1,024 regular bits. If you've got 20 qubits, that can take on the values of 1,000,000 bits. So if you've got 100 qubits, it can take on the values of 1.279 million bits. So here you start to see the power of the superposition and how qubits are just exponentially more powerful than a regular bit because they can do all of that stuff at the same time. We'll talk more about that coming up.
Guys, I have a confession. I made it through 2 bullet points before I got lost. I feel like I'm in Alan's son's Chinese class.
Oh, don't worry. We'll get you caught up. So we're going to kind of be revisiting these ideas a little bit. And at the end of this, if you want to know more about it, there's some great material on the internet. There's plenty of stuff to brush up. Important to note that quantum computers are not programmed like a regular machine. Like you can't just kind of pony up there and program it with C# or COBOL or something like that, right? So it requires algorithms to be fed to it. And we'll talk about one of those algorithms is when we get into cryptography. But scientists are still developing, and particularly mathematicians are still developing algorithms to feed quantum computers. And we'll talk a little bit also about why that matters and how that's different. Now, before I advance it and kind of go into some of those details, let's get introduced to the quantum computer. So for most of these slides, you're going to see a quantum computer on your right side. And these are all going to be different ones, but they all kind of look the same. So here's what we're looking at here. The quantum computer is usually a multi-tiered model. And I'm going to talk about why that is in just a moment, but you'll see that all these wires coming down here, that's called a chandelier, because it looks like a chandelier, so they gave it a catchy name like that. And these are a combination of signal cables as well as superconducting circuits. The little, these bars you see kind of coming down the center here and these squiggly things, this is the refrigerant. Now, as the refrigerant, which by the way is liquid nitrogen, comes down through these tiers, it gets colder and colder and colder until it reaches the bottom. Now, the bottom is where the quantum processor is kept. So all of this that you see right here, all of that is really just signals and cryogenics to keep the thing cold. And the reason that the quantum processor at the very bottom of this has to be so cold is because it has to achieve near absolute zero to achieve superconductivity. Only then can quantum activity happen. So at close to 0 degrees Kelvin, the most atomic motion stops, right? And so at that point, you can then start to manipulate these atoms and get the quantum measurements that you want. So at 15 millikelvin, just above absolute zero, that's colder than outer space. Quantum computer is probably the coldest thing in the known universe.
And is it liquid helium or liquid nitrogen?
Liquid helium. Liquid nitrogen doesn't get cold enough.
Bill, can you give us an example of how big this is to scale?
5 feet tall. And the reason that you're going to see that it is usually suspended from a ceiling or from a superstructure, not from a ceiling, from a superstructure. It's usually off the floor because if they put it on the floor, it's going to pick up way too many vibrations, which is going to completely screw up the quantum measurement. So they have to suspend it from a superstructure and try to isolate it from the outside world to reduce vibrations, to reduce noise. And what you're seeing here also is the quantum computer opened up, much like a computer with your case off. Over top of this will be a shroud that will further shield it from the outside elements.
Do they put LED lights on them Like a cool gaming computer?
They should. It would look beautiful if these whole things were like LEDs, like blue and green, and maybe like a rainbow pattern. But no, they couldn't do that because then it would just not work. So that gets you introduced to sort of the physical, like what a quantum computer looks like, what it's made of, and just the really high level basics. Let's talk a little bit about why that matters. So we had talked earlier a bit about superposition. At 300 qubits, we talked earlier like 100 qubits that a quantum computer could do. What was it like over a nonillion number of values? At 300 qubits, a quantum computer can represent 10 to the 90th possible states simultaneously. Now that represents more particles than are in the known universe. So it's just astronomically high number. If you think you can imagine that number, you really can't. It's absolutely enormous quantity. And what makes this so interesting is that we can do this today. IBM already has a quantum computer with 433 qubits. So by virtue of that, IBM has a quantum computer that can represent more values simultaneously than there are atoms in the known universe. Needless to say, conventional computers can't process information that quickly, much less hold it in memory, like a quantum machine can. Quantum machines don't really need the memory for it. It's just the way that their mechanics work. However, it's worth noting that although they can hold such an enormous number of values, they can't report all of them at the same time. You can go in and read one of those values, but by the nature of quantum mechanics, when you read that value, you change it. And so you can read a value and it gives you back that value and all the other data disappears. So they have to build other algorithms and put other electronics around it and play some very clever tricks to get the value that they want out of that sheer number of possibilities. And that's where the math just gets out of control, which I won't go into today, in large part because I can't. It's probably obvious by now that maybe a quantum computer isn't a brute force device. It just works on different physics, right? So with today's computers, you can throw supercomputers at it, just throw more processors at it, more memory, bigger circuits, and just kind of brute force your way through it. Quantum is a lot more elegant than that because it's just doing things much differently and it's just enormously parallel. And so incalculable problems become possible to solve.
Hey, Bill, will quantum ever be able to tell us how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop?
I love the throwback to the 80s. I love it. That little owl. Yeah, no, that's good stuff. But we will talk about what quantum will allow us to do going forward, although I think that question will always be elusive. It can, of course, solve problems in quantum chemistry, quantum physics. That's what it was designed to do. That's the whole reason the quantum computers were developed, was to solve those types of quantum mechanical problems. And the reason it can do that and everything else below it is because quantum computers are really, really good at spotting periodic structures. And I'm going to talk about why that's important for cryptography too. But computers are not that good at spotting those types of structures. But the way that they develop the algorithms for quantum, it picks it up quite easily. The other one that it can do really good is healthcare, drug discovery. It can diagnose diseases. It can predict diseases in people based on that pattern recognition, based on seeing those structures. Will be used for machine learning and artificial intelligence. A lot of the machine learning today is assisted, supervised learning. Quantum will be able to make that unsupervised, again, by spotting those structures. In the same way a person would, a quantum computer can kind of do it in an automated fashion, thereby improving the outcomes of the AI results. Cybersecurity has a huge role to play. Again, I'll keep teasing the encryption. We're going to get to it, but so I'll bounce over that. But it also is really good at detecting anomalies in traffic flows and other behaviors. It'll be used in financials for market predictions. It'll be used in meteorology to model climate and forecast changes in weather patterns.
If it's unsupervised, I interpret that to mean it's going to be out gathering data or inputs on its own versus what we do today with ML and AI, where you need a data set that you kind of feed it, and it's got to have access to a whole bunch of data in order to come back with the outputs. So this will be, I'm going to say, self-learning, for lack of a better term.
Close to it. There's a little bit of a nuance on that, I think, and that is that not necessarily just kind of set it loose and it kind of figures it out on its own, but you would still point it at a data set. You can make the data set as large as you want, but you wouldn't necessarily have to come back to it and say, oh, no, you interpreted this wrong. I don't mean this way. With quantum computing and with pattern recognition and quantum just recognizing the structures of knowledge, it should be able to get most of that right most of the time. But you would still need to kind of just point it at a data set, however large you wanted it to be.
Interesting. So conceptually, I could point it at the intranet, period, and then say, go write my term paper on whatever subject, and then it generates it, brings it back, and I get an A.
Well, yeah, what you're describing sort of sounds like ChatGPT for sure. But ChatGPT doesn't recognize the differences between true and false knowledge, right? Whereas quantum can help to bridge that gap.
Okay, got it. Thank you, sir.
Yep. So we talked about all the benefits of quantum. There are still some things holding it back, though. I hinted earlier that quantum was susceptible to interference, and hence it was shielded and it was raised off the floor. That's a very big problem. So it is susceptible to electromagnetic fields. It is susceptible to heat. It is susceptible to sound, vibration, pretty much anything at all, right? So just getting too close, it's susceptible to photonics, right? So just kind of getting too close to a quantum computer can interrupt its flow. So you tend to find these very sheltered in rooms with a whole bunch of shielding around them. In fact, even quantum computers that are encased in, say, lead, they are impacted by the natural radioactive decay of these elements. Therefore, you have to have really, really clever error correction circuitry to recognize errors when they happen because of these uncontrollable situations and account for that and adjust the responses. We referenced some of the limitations in measuring the states. So I said before, it can handle a vast quantity of information, but when you read that information, then it disappears. And so you can capture kind of like one value at a time, basically. And so you have to work with that as well. These are expensive machines. You tend to find quantum computers with big, and I'm going to talk about who has these, but with agencies, countries, and companies that have the pockets to afford them. And they require a lot of cryogenics. So again, like most of what you see in a quantum computer, very little of it is the processing. Most of it is just everything to support it. And it's not a computer like this. It doesn't just exist by itself. It interfaces with a regular computer. So it passes all this information to a regular computer that then manipulates it to be digested by human minds. But just the power that has to go into a quantum machine to cryogenically cool it down to absolute zero is pretty significant. So really, over 90% of the power that goes into quantum is around the cooling, and very little is actually required for the processing itself.
So then, Bill, let's assume all of the merits you've described are true, and this type of processing it is going to deliver on all the things you kind of laid out. If the cost, though, to get there is so large, is there truly a practical use case in the commercial market? As everyone looks at, the cost of ownership, will this ever be a viable option on a larger scale?
It will be. It's an investment that will yield returns. and usually in pretty quick order. So it'll accelerate workloads dramatically, and it'll help companies find solutions a lot quicker. Let's say you're a pharmaceutical firm, and you are researching your next pharmaceutical. Say you want to research your next antibacterial drug. Antibacterials are not usually very hugely profitable drugs, but with a regular computer, let's say you have a supercomputer, it'll take you years and years to get there. With an adequately powered quantum machine, that gets reduced to weeks, days, potentially hours, right? So you save yourself a whole lot of time, and you also got to market more quickly than your competitor has.
Okay. And so if I'm IBM, I am selling compute time to those industries that are trying to solve these really big problems, and that's how I commercialize it.
Yes, and you bring up a great point, which is that quantum capabilities are available in the cloud, with some caveats. So companies like IBM will make their quantum capabilities available, provided that you're a friendly actor. So you're generally not going to make it available to some certain nation states. But yeah, you can do it that way, or you can just buy your own, right? Some companies have very deep pockets, and Booz Allen Hamilton has a quantum machine. Hitachi has one, right? So you won't find them just at IBM.
I'd also add to what Alan said and wonder about the rate of development and the rate of maturity. So, Moore's law says that computing power doubles every year to two, right? So I wonder if quantum has a similar trajectory, or if anybody has even tried to guess at the rate of quantum development yet. Do you know, Bill?
Yes. The people have predicted the rate of quantum growth based on past growth, and in 2030, thereabouts, National Institute of Standards and Technology believe that there will exist a quantum computer capable of breaking RSA encryption, which is where I think we're headed next.
Wasn't RSA encryption already broken?
No, not RSA 2048. Like maybe some smaller bit sizes of RSA, but 2048 still remains secure.
I thought they had a backdoor into that. Wasn't there a scandal or whatever on that a couple of years ago?
Not that I'm aware of, but RSA 2048 is still one of the preferred encryption technologies used for today's TLS. So hopefully there's no backdoor, because that would be a huge problem. So this is exactly. You guys are great. You guys are just taking me exactly where we're going every step of the way. So we got 2 slides. I'm going to talk about the encryption that's vulnerable, and then I'm going to talk about the answers to that. And let's talk about vulnerabilities first. RSA 2048, which is used widely for TLS and VPN connections, will soon be vulnerable to encryption, NIST believes. Another one that will be vulnerable is elliptic curve, and elliptic curve is used for Bitcoin transactions. And then Diffie-Hellman, which is also used for TLS, as well as other things. So to give you an idea of how difficult these algorithms are to crack, the Frontier supercomputer, which is a collaboration between HP, AMD, and others, it resides in Tennessee. It's the most powerful supercomputer in the world today. I'm sure that'll be replaced by something else in 12 months. It would take it billions of years to crack that. Again, because you're really trying to deal with factoring large prime numbers, which neither classical computers nor people are good at doing. It's an enormously time-consuming task. Quantum today will also take billions of years to crack any of those algorithms that you see listed above. But in 2030, NIST believes that there may be a quantum machine that might take a few hours to crack it, based on the rate of growth that we're seeing. So in 98, 2 qubits. Today, 433 qubits, and IBM is expected to release a quantum machine this year yet. I think it's Condor, we're going to get there, that has over 1,000 qubits. So we're seeing this Not quite exponential growth yet, but we're seeing this march towards much more powerful computers. Now, here's why this matters. It's reasonable today to say, well, quantum computers can't crack the encryption that I use on websites. So you go to a website, HTTPS, you log into your bank, you log into your healthcare provider, or whatever it is, and you can feel reasonably safe over that connection. Feel safe insofar as no one's going to crack, just like brute force crack the encryption between you and your destination. However, rest assured that there are countries and other bad actors who are collecting that information and they're storing it. And then when they have a powerful enough machine to break it, they're going to come back. And they're going to break that. They're going to break that encryption, and then they'll have information. Now, some of the information may be stale, right? But some of it won't be so stale. So, encrypted images of military installations, 7-8 years from now, might be really helpful. Information about those private messages that one politician sent to another, 7 years from now, oh yeah, they'll be really helpful for blackmail, right? So that's going to be a problem. They've already got the information. It's just a matter of time before they can read it.
So RSA is used only basically to exchange keys in TLS, right? So we don't encrypt the entire contents of your web browsing session with RSA encryption. We use it to exchange a key, and then like AES or some more efficient symmetric algorithm is used to encrypt the actual transit in transit. And perfect forward secrecy is a way to try to decouple that initial key that is exchanged with RSA from the encryption of the rest of the transit session.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that to me too, because I wasn't very familiar with perfect forward secrecy. But the way you explain it is yes, and here's why. So AES 128 and 256 are both quantum safe. So let's define quantum safe. It is that no efficient known algorithm, classical or quantum, can invert the function being used to protect the data. So you have a hash function or an encryption function with this algorithm. You can't just reverse it and say, oh, that's the answer. Here are the current quantum safe encryption technologies today. And this is not an exhaustive list. The big ones, SHA-256, AES 128 and 256, and RSA 4096. RSA 2048 still quantum safe. I'm just saying that RSA 4096 will probably still be quantum safe in 2030 because you're increasing the bit length. You are making it more difficult for a quantum computer to break it. Likewise, AES 128 and 256 could theoretically be quantum safe indefinitely because all you really need to do is just increasing the bit size. So it could be AES, 384 or 512, right? And that will just make it exponentially more difficult to solve. However, the National Institute of Standards and Technology is leaving nothing to chance. So in 2016, they invited mathematicians and scientists around the world to submit their plans for new encryption techniques that would be quantum safe by the definition provided above, which means it needs to be safe from a classical attack as well. A lot of submissions came. Some of them were thrown out. There was one submission that was cracked with a regular PC, given given enough time. So clearly not going to work. There were a couple of submissions that went well into round 3 and then finally failed because it was cracked. But 4 of them rose to the top. For general encryption, Crystal's Kyber has already been named a solution. And for digital signatures, to verify people's identities, Crystal's Dilithium, Falcon, and Sphinx were the 3 that rose to the top. All of these are going to be available probably in 2024, and they should be deployable then. The reason there are so many of them, and by the way, there's more coming. So there's going to be a round 2, and the round 2 will focus on general encryption only. They've already got enough digital signature solutions, so you're going to see things getting added to the Crystal Kyber. But let me talk about some of the differences here. So 3 of these 4 use cryptography that's predicated on lattice mathematics, and I'm going to talk about what that is. And then the last one, Sphinx Plus, is a hash-based algorithm. And the reason that NIST did this is because they wanted two completely different solutions, right? So in case lattice-based cryptography is cracked, well, they can fall back on Sphinx Plus, right, and have a hashing algorithm, which so far still works fine, given enough, given a long enough key length. So here's what lattice-based mathematics is. It's really fascinating stuff. Imagine, if you will, you've got yourself a sheet of 8.5 by 11 sheet of grid paper, and now imagine that you make that three-dimensional. So instead of just length and width, now you've got depth. Now I want you to expand that, blow it up to say 100 miles wide and 100 miles deep. Now I want you to add 1,000 dimensions to it. So now you've got this 1,000 dimensioned, huge, 100-mile wide, deep, and high grid. And the problem that you're being asked to solve is to find the shortest point between A and B within that structure. That is enormously difficult for anything known to do because there is no periodic structure to it. So a classical computer can't really figure that out, and a quantum computer can't figure that out. That's lattice-based mathematical cryptography.
Bill, quick question about that. Mm-hmm. Is that the shortest distance, I don't want to say linearly, but like linearly, thinking in three-dimensional space? Or is it the shortest distance following some route through the network, let's say 90-degree angles between nodes, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it is the second one, where you're trying to follow the nodes. Yep.
Huh. Interesting.
Can you create a wormhole between the two?
You should be able to, given this topic.
That's how we crack this, Eric.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's patent that.
And the third quantum safe encryption for discussion here is around photonics. This one's really interesting because it uses the principle of quantum mechanics, in which as soon as you observe something, you change it. So with quantum, with photonics, it's more of a detective technique. It's not a prevention technique. So you encrypt something strongly, but if someone is eavesdropping on it, you will know because the qubits within that transmission are entangled, right? So if you impact one of those photons, one of those particles, then you will impact the other, and then you will know that someone is eavesdropping on your data. Now, I don't think we talked too much about entanglement, but entanglement is the phenomenon in quantum mechanics in which any changes to one particle, its sister particle, regardless of distance. So they can be infinitely far apart, and that's going to happen.
I feel like we need a dad joke in here, or to talk about Nick's cats.
To lighten the mood, to bring it up a level.
You were just talking about some sort of a sheet of paper that had 1,000 dimensions and 1,000 miles wide and deep.
Well, this is crazy stuff, and I'm not a mathematician, right? But this is like really fascinating stuff to look into. It really boggles because of these. When we're talking about quantum, we really are talking about this multi-dimensional computing, and it's crazy. Yeah.
I've got something for us. Got some quantum jokes. Can I just interject these once in a while?
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah.
So there's three types of people in the world: those who understand quantum computing, those who don't understand quantum computing, and those who simultaneously do and do not understand quantum computing.
Yeah. I think I might be more of the third, but just barely understanding it myself. So let's lighten the mood a little bit here. We're gonna come back up and talk about countries with quantum. You'll see kind of a fairly familiar list. I don't think there's any big surprises in this list. Maybe the Netherlands a little bit. Probably 95+% of quantum is happening in the United States, Canada, and China in terms of the power that they have. Within the United States, IBM is really leading the field. They're very public about their quantum capabilities. Some news came out of China earlier this year in which they claim to have already broken RSA 2048. But that was immediately met with a lot of skepticism, and so it appears that is not the case. They do not have a computer capable of doing that, but it's still something that we're watching for 2030.
And what is RSA again?
I forget the names of the three scientists who developed it, but it's an encryption technology that's used for asymmetric encryption to transmit traffic from over the internet. So as opposed to a symmetric encryption algorithm like AES, RSA is asymmetric, in which you're using a public key and a private key.
And real quick to add to that, the beauty of public key cryptosystems or asymmetric encryption is that you can reach a shared key across an insecure channel like the internet, and you can have somebody sitting in the middle watching all the traffic going in both directions, and they can't arrive at the same key. So it basically makes internet commerce and trusted communications possible for anybody who's never met somebody else in a park or in a parking garage after dark to secretly exchange that key. We can, in the light of day, two people can get a secure session going with no prior contact or communication.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm studying for the CISSP again. So you guys have all experienced this, I'm sure, where you go to some sort of family dinner or gathering of people that aren't in security, and they start asking you what you do, and you go down this long kind of diatribe about something that you're working on that you're really into, and they just glaze over and they have no idea what you're talking about because you're using these acronyms that nobody really understands, right? I wonder what these poor quantum scientists do, because anywhere they go, they're talking about stuff that like a handful of people really grasp.
I presented the same deck at my last family outing this past Memorial Day. No one was interested. Yeah.
You found yourself sitting alone at some.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm not invited back. So here are some of the companies with quantum computers today. I think it's an interesting list. Again, there aren't many big surprises on here. I do want to point out that a lot of universities have quantum, right? And it's not surprising, but it's interesting that today's students are learning this, and they're fiddling with it in the lab, and they're part of the tip of the spear when it comes to this type of research.
And no. I'm sure nation states have it. Is it just not publicized?
They do. U.S. Department of Energy has quantum. You better believe the NSA has quantum. And then, nation states, China, Russia, yes, they have quantum. And there's a race. There's a race to get to a quantum computer that is sufficiently large enough to do some real damage, which is where I'm going. So let's talk through IBM's quantum roadmap. So in 2019, they introduced Falcon. That was 27 qubits. Today, they're on Condor, 1121. They're going to be introducing Condor. I don't think it's out yet. It should be coming later this year. Right now, they're still sitting on 433. And by 2026, they really want to get above 10,000 qubits. But IBM has a very defined roadmap for how they can scale their capabilities.
Bill, are you aware of who comes up with these names?
No, but I love Kookaburra. My next pet would absolutely be named Kookaburra. So
Next cat.
Yeah. So let's get into that right now. So where is this going? Qubits will continue to increase. I think things become very useful at about 10,000 qubits. You can this starts to have some real world applications in some of the things that we just mentioned. Some of like the automotive industry, any business industry to solve complex problems. But after like 1,000 qubits or so, IBM believes that the machines will have to be linked fiber optically. So in other words, horizontally scaled, right? As opposed to continually try to to vertically scale the quantum computer itself is going to be more difficult, because trying to get that many perfect qubits into a single processor is really tough. So horizontally scaling is probably going to be the way it's going to go. They will benefit from more practical superconductors, maybe superconductors that don't have to be so aggressively cooled, or there are other methods to make them work. Do expect some performance innovations outside of qubits. So I mentioned earlier that quantum computers are also connected to conventional computers. They work in tandem. We'll probably end up seeing more of that, where a classical computer will be brought to bear to facilitate some of the results that come from the quantum machine. And also expect new ways of measuring workloads, because it's never enough to measure something one way. I think qubit will become a very vague term. Already there are qubits can have variations in their quality. So some qubits can be highly fault tolerant, others less so, and the highly fault tolerant qubits are more powerful, right? So you have to keep an eye on that as well. Not all qubits are created equal. I think quantum computers will be functional. I think most people agree that quantum computers will be functional coming up, but really its potential is still, we're still trying to figure that out.
Bill, do you know any applications where classical computers are expected to still be better than quantum going forward?
Oh yeah, probably tons.
At the right scales?
Yeah, sure. So really anything that doesn't have any periodic structure to look at. Things that are highly randomized, where it requires, if they're getting highly randomized input, a classical computer is going to excel at that, because there's just no structure to go out and find. So gaming is going to be one example.
Would it change potentially how cryptocurrency works? Because today cryptocurrency is racing to solve a complex problem over a period of time, and then getting cryptocurrency as a reward for solving that problem. Would quantum essentially disrupt that and potentially cause like a fork?
So what you're talking about there is proof of work, and quantum computing will absolutely impact proof of work, because proof of work is, they're trying to find these large prime numbers. Quantum's good at that. So yeah, it will disrupt any type of proof of work crypto that works on big primes.
Didn't Ethereum move to proof of stake?
Yeah, Ethereum too. Yep.
Yeah. And when we talk about quantum, just to go back to the beginning, quantum is the state of the atom that it's in. What atom is it? They use different elements for the superconductivity. Off the top of my head, I don't recall. I remember seeing this. I don't recall specifically what elements they use in their superconductor. But they're taking an element that superconducts very, very well, and they use the atoms within that. Is it the proton, the neutron, or the electron?
Oh, I believe it's with the. I think they're changing the electrons, but there again, I'm not sure. Because now we're getting into a level that I'm not sure what part specifically of the atom that they're following, but I think it's the electron. Do we have any more quantum jokes?
Yeah. So an electron was pulled over by the quantum state patrol, and the officer walks up to the car and says, "Do you know how fast you were going?" To which the electron responds, "No, but I know where I am."
Nice. I'm going to try these out on my kid. Yeah. She'll hate them. She'll hate them. Yep.
Well, Bill, thank you very much. A very deep topic, and you certainly have done your research.
Pleasure presenting it to you. Really interesting topic. I would encourage anyone, if you want to learn more about this, to check out your resources on the internet. YouTube has some fantastic things from your favorite physicists, ones you certainly recognize, and they go into this. They take it into different areas.
Nick, last time we were talking about our favorite physicists. Mine was Brian Cox and Dr. Miku Kaku. Did you come up with a favorite physicist?
About 10 minutes ago, I had the same thought, and I didn't get around to it, so that's homework for next time.
How about you, Scott?
Feynman's cool. He actually wrote a book called You Can't Be Serious or something like that. And it was like just kind of physics humor, not just cheap jokes like these, but like just kind of a really approachable, humorous book about physics. I think it was written in like the 60s or something, so it's pretty dated now, but he was just like a genuinely cool guy. Are we still recording?
We are.
Okay. Never mind. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Tell you some Richard Feynman stories.
You have been listening to The Audit, presented by IT Audit Labs. We are experts at assessing security risk and compliance while providing administrative and technical controls to improve our clients' data security. Our threat assessments find the soft spots before the bad guys do, identifying likelihood and impact, while our security control assessments rank the level of maturity relative to the size of your organization.